Hey, what's up guys? I'm Eric, and in this video we're going to take a look at how you can quickly add a full set of blend shapes and good topology to a mesh that you've sculpted in Zbrush with a little help from scan data. Now in the last video we sculpted this head that we're going to use in this video from a sphere, and so it doesn't really have great topology, it just has a basic zebra mesh. But what if you want to add UVs or have good edge flow that you could use maybe for animation or something like that? Well, there's something that we can use to really speed it along. Now, it's always a good practice to retopologize by hand just to learn edge flow and learn the fundamentals, but sometimes we just want to do stuff fast. That's where this asset from 3dscanstore.com comes in. If you've never used their website before, they have a bunch of scan data for textures, faces, all kinds of things. They have a free asset called the Multi-Expression Basemesh, which is a base mesh with UVs and a whole set of blend shapes on it. And what's cool is that the UVs on this mesh are standardized across everything in 3D Scan Store. So any of their textures and stuff you can apply to a model with these UVs and use their assets, which is pretty cool. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this base mesh that they've provided and we're actually going to mold its shape to our sculpt. But we need a tool to do that, and that tool is called Zwrap. Now there is a whole program called R3DS, and the company is Russian 3D Scanner, but they have a plugin called Zwrap that we can use to get a great result and is going to be perfectly suitable for stylized characters like what we're doing here. And so Zwrap costs about $100, but you can get a 30-day free trial if you just want to try it out. So this isn't a free method necessarily, but I think it's a method that's pretty cool and could be worth it. So I want to talk you through the process and show you the result. So here we have the base mesh that they've provided. It's just a basic male head. And if we scroll down to the layers, you can see that they have a whole set of layers with blend shapes that have eyes, smile, different phonemes, different expressions, different mouth shapes, pretty much everything you would need to make a cool expression on your character. And these trend towards realism, obviously, because they're scan data, but we can still use these for our character and get a pretty cool result. So that's what we're going to try. Now, you install Zwrap just like you would any piece of software. And once you install it, it adds a location in your Z plugin folder in ZBrush that we can launch it from. So you want to have selected the mesh that we're going to target to, which is the base mesh that we got from 3D Scan Store. And then we're going to also turn on the mesh that we're targeting from, which is our sculpt from the last video. Now we can go to Z plugin Zwrap and go ahead and run Zwrap, give it a moment to think. And you'll see it brings up this menu right here where it's a side-by-side of the base mesh and of our sculpt, which is pretty cool. Now, the basic premise of Zwrap is that we're going in and hand placing points on both meshes to indicate how it should conform to the other mesh. And so we're going in and saying, hey, the corner of the eye is right here. And we're identifying that position on both meshes. And once we do that enough times on enough different areas of the face, the program has enough data to understand how to conform the base mesh to your sculpt and get a clean result. And so that's what we're taking a look at. So there's a couple things to note here. You can see there's different settings across the top. One thing I like to use is the sync views button in the top right. This just makes it so when you move one model, it's moving the other model in the exact same way, and just kind of helps you visualize and keep track of what you're doing. So to start, you can choose an area that you want to focus on, and we're just going to place a few points. So you just go ahead and just click, and I'm going to start with the eye. So we're just going to click around the eye a bit in the inside corner, and then we're going to just kind of go around the lip. And you'll see as we put these dots down, they have numbers 0, 1, 2, 3. And so this is very important because we need to make sure the numbers match the position of our mesh that we are targeting from. So you'll see 0 is the corner, and then we have 1, 2, 3, and then 5 is the outside edge. And so just make sure that we keep track of that. So you're clicking in one viewport, and then you're clicking in the other viewport. Now you don't have to click at the same time. You just have to keep track of the numbers that you're clicking to make sure that they're lining up side by side. So I do the one eye, and then I repeat the other eye. I think there is some symmetry options, but I've had some weird luck with it, so I tend to just do it by hand on both sides. And I'm sure there's instructions about like exactly how many areas you're supposed to cover, but I like to just be pretty comprehensive and get a bunch of the really refined areas. So I'm going to do the eyes, I'm going to do the inside of the nose, the mouth, the ears, and maybe a few other points here or there, just to give it a lot of information to work with in terms of how to retarget this mesh. Once we're happy with that, we actually can save the layout of our points for future reference in case we need to redo this. And keep in mind that saving these files off are unique to both meshes. So on the left, you have the load, save, and reset for your source mesh, and then you have the load, save, reset for your sculpt on the right side. So you have to save those individually in order to load them properly. Then at the bottom, you see that we're selected on select points. Now we can switch over to wrapping. So we go ahead and hit wrapping. There's a few things that we can hit. There's rigid alignment, which is good to hit before you start wrapping, which just tries to roughly line them up. And then if the scale of these was way off, you can also hit match scale, which will attempt to resize them. But ours were pretty close, so you're not going to see a huge change here. And then there's some other settings too. There's preferences to like really dial in and control how the wrap happens. We're going to keep these default because I find that they're usually fine. There's also edge sampler, which I think is a rough and dirty way to wrap, but we're doing the full business. So once we hit rigid alignment and match scale, we can go up to the left-hand corner and hit start wrapping. And you can actually move the viewport around as this is happening, but it's going to take a while. So don't feel like it's frozen. Most likely it could take maybe a minute, or it could take 10 or 20 minutes based on the detail of your mesh. So just give it some time. You'll see that mesh slowly gets more in line with your mesh as it goes through all the steps. Then eventually it'll finish and you can hit done. And then when we go back to normal ZBrush, you'll see that the base mesh now looks like your sculpt, which is really cool. And if we go to the layers tab, you'll see that all of the layers are now on your sculpt. And so suddenly a sculpt that was just a default face has all these options for expressions. We have eyes closed, eyes tight, brows down, all the different mouth shapes and stuff like that, which is really cool. And then since these are focused on realism, we can actually go in and sculpt on them and make changes to them. So for example, the closed eyelids was a little rough, and so you can just hit record on the layer and then just re-sculpt on top of that expression and make changes that fit your character. Or since we're doing a stylized character, you could go through and smooth out some of the detail and wrinkles to make it a little more simplified. But these are really good templates that get you close in just a few minutes, which is awesome. And then you can kind of make changes and really make them work for your character, which I think is really cool. If there's any issues like around the mouth, sometimes some areas don't quite wrap correctly, we can just go in and clean that stuff up, smooth it out, reapply our mouth poly groups, anything that we need to do so that we can get a nice clean result. So as long as you don't have any of the layers recording, you can make changes to the overall mesh, and then anytime a layer is recording, you're modifying that expression. So keep that in mind. And so just to finish it off, we can run through some of our expressions on a more finalized mesh to kind of see the results. There's still some more work I would do with these, absolutely, but it's pretty cool. Yeah, like we mentioned in the beginning, Zwrap isn't free. You know, it is $100 software, so this isn't necessarily a cheap method. But if you're someone that likes to do a lot of faces and you want to be able to give them expressions and stuff, and this is something you do often, it might be a good investment because this is a really, really fast way to be able to do that. And I think it gives you a good result because the 3D Scan Store base mesh has very, very clean topology and very clean UVs. So it's a nice base mesh to use and build on. The last thing I want to talk about is how do you actually blend these together to make an expression? And you can use a combination of storing the morph target and a new layer. Go to morph target, store morph target, and then we can go to one that we want to start, say brows raised. We can raise the brows and then go to our brush, our morph brush, and morph one side so that only maybe one brow is raised. And then we can turn off the recording and you'll see that it'll store in our custom layer. And then once we're happy with that, we can delete our morph target, store another morph target, and then do another layer, move that layer around, and just kind of repeat that process. So it's this process of storing a morph target, messing around with it, deleting it, storing it, and then kind of continuously working on your custom layer until you get the expression that you want. So it's a bit clunky, but it will get you a cool expression. The other thing is you can also just send these to Maya. So if you go to Z plugin, Maya Blend Shapes, you see there's a panel for blend shapes. And if we hit send to Maya, it'll actually go through all the layers, export those as meshes, and then kick us over to Maya with those set up on a mesh with blend shapes already intact in Maya. So you can see if we go to the blend shape window here, we have all the sliders for blend shapes to give us a expression, which is really cool. So if you need to send this over to Maya to put it on a rig or something, that's how you can do that. So this is very powerful and very flexible and gives us a lot of control about how our facial expressions look. Obviously, you could just do this whole process and sculpt your own facial expressions, but by using that 3D Scan Store free multi-expression base mesh, we get a jump start to kind of working on stuff and helping us visualize how our character looks smiling or frowning or surprised or whatever. So, pretty cool stuff. I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. In the next video, we're going to do episode 2 of Stylized Hair, where we're going to use IMM brushes to give her a hairstyle. So definitely check that out. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing and hitting the thumbs up. I appreciate it. If you have comments or questions, go ahead and drop a comment in the comment section below. I always try to get back to that stuff. And I hope this was helpful. Don't stop creating. I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.